government plans a temporary visa scheme to make it easier for foreign lorry drivers to work in the UK.
This is the third petrol station that we have seen queues at.
It follows queues for fuel because of a shortage of hauliers, despite motorists being told to buy petrol normally.
If people adhere to their normal buying patterns, there's more than enough resilience in the service station network as a whole to deal with that. There's no need for people to rush out and fill up their cars with fuel. The country is not running out of fuel.
Final details of the government's plans will be unveiled this weekend. Also on the programme, a candlelit vigil for the London teacher Sabrina Nessa, whose body was discovered in a park near her home. Her sister spoke of their loss.
Words cannot describe how we are feeling. This feels like we are stuck in a bad dream and can't get out of it. Our world is shattered.
The death of 13-year-old Ollie Stevens. 3 teenagers are sentenced to a total of 28 years for his killing. The migrants freezing and stranded on the border between Poland and Belarus. And the 43rd Ryder Cup finally tees off in Wisconsin. But can Europe upset the odds to win again?
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News channel, Anthony Joshua weighs in 20 pounds heavier than Alexander Usyk ahead of their world title fight tomorrow.
Good evening. Ministers are working on plans for a temporary visa scheme to make it easier for foreign lorry drivers to come to the UK after BP and Esso shut a number of petrol stations due to a lack of tanker drivers. Motorists in different parts of the country have been pictured queuing for fuel, leading another retailer to put a £30 limit on customers. Just around 100 petrol stations out of 8,300 have closed because of delivery issues. The problem isn't a shortage of fuel, but of hauliers. The industry says around 100,000 more lorry drivers are needed. We'll have more on the government's plans in just a moment. But first, our business correspondent Katie Austin reports.
The government has told people not to panic buy, but that didn't stop these drivers queuing at petrol stations today, including Bromley, Evesham and Sheffield.
This is the third petrol station that we have seen queues at. We actually have to get petrol, we're not panic buying.
The boss of another in Stockport is waiting to hear when his next supplies will arrive.
Well, they're saying that we hope you get it, but we can't guarantee it. Right. So we're just not sure until we get in about 2 days' time. The current rates will want another. Whether we get it or not, we just don't know at the moment.
The firm that delivers for BP sought to reassure motorists.
Our trucks keep rolling. We have seen a small amount of panic buying, and I think I'll be clear that if people adhere to their normal buying patterns, there's more than enough resilience in the service station network as a whole to deal with that. There's no need for people to rush out and fill up their cars with fuel. The country is not running out of fuel.
There isn't a shortage of fuel. Where we are seeing issues, it's because of another problem, the lack of available lorry drivers. It's thought there's currently a shortfall of tens of thousands in the UK. The problem has been building for years, but has been made worse by factors including the pandemic and Brexit. This haulage firm in Northampton has never found recruitment so hard.
In the past few months, we've increased salaries twice by a significant amount, which we then need to pass on to our customers where we can.
So this is all driving up costs, basically?
Absolutely it is.
Next door, there's a business which trains up new drivers.
Steering quickly, driving as slow as you can.
It's getting plenty of interest from locals. The testing system is set to change soon to make it simpler, but the manager here says that's not a quick fix for the shortage.
The idea is that they remove the middle test so that you can go from your Fiat 500 straight into an articulated vehicle, Class 1, Cat CE. In actuality, you're probably going to find that the pass rate will drop, the course length will have to be longer, you're going to be delivering fewer tests.
The government has so far resisted calls for temporary visas to help plug the gap, but is now working on plans to introduce them.
I would do whatever is required if that would help. What I don't want to do, and I've been hinting at this, is undercut with, as has happened before, cheaper European drivers and then find that our drivers drop out because they're being undercut. That doesn't solve the problem, it just creates a new problem.
After a week when warnings of supply chain problems and labour shortages have dominated, businesses say action is needed fast to prevent the wheels coming off the economy's recovery. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Let's go now to Westminster and to our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young. Vicky, what more can you tell us about the government's plans?
Well, tonight, Downing Street has put out a statement saying that it is working and looking at temporary measures to avoid any immediate problems. Now, there's no official confirmation of this, but I understand that that will include a visa scheme to cover foreign lorry drivers and maybe other workers from other sectors too, although, again, the details have not been set out yet. Now, this isn't a particularly popular idea with many cabinet ministers. That's, of course, because the new immigration system, which came in after Brexit, was all about saying to companies, you can't rely on cheap foreign labour anymore. You've got to focus on the workforce here in this country. You've got to train them. You've got to pay them better wages. And of course, relaxing those immigration rules now really undermines that message. And it could lead, of course, to other sectors saying, well, look, we want special treatment too. But I think ministers know that this situation could get very difficult very quickly. And so they do have to act, even though this is going to cause huge political embarrassment. Labour already saying, look, we told you about this. We said this should happen months ago. And I think Boris Johnson knows all too well that his opponents are going to be very ready to say, we told you so.
Vicky, thank you. Vicky Young there. A candlelit vigil to remember the primary school teacher Sabrina Nessa has been held this evening in Kidbrooke, the community where she lived. Police are searching for a man captured on CCTV near where the 28-year-old was killed in southeast London a week ago. It comes as officers have released another man they were questioning in connection with her death, pending further investigation. June Kelly reports.
Last Friday, Sabrina Nessa was heading for a night out here in Pegler Square in Kidbrooke. Tonight, people gathered at the same spot to remember her. Sabrina was 28 and a primary school teacher when her life was suddenly taken. And at the heart of this gathering, her broken family. Her sister spoke for them.
Sabrina loved her family. We had lost our sister. My parents have lost their daughter, and my girls have lost such a brilliant, loving, caring auntie who dearly loved her. Words cannot describe how we are feeling. This feels like we are stuck in a bad dream and can't get out of it. Our world is shattered.
Most people here never knew Sabrina, but they were urged to say her name.
Sabrina Nessa. Sabrina Nessa.
A confirmation of what has been lost became a refrain cutting through the autumn air. And amidst the sadness, there was anger that another woman has died in an act of violence.
All of us want to live in a world where every woman and every girl is not only safe, but that are free. Free from the fear, free from the threat of violence or harassment.
Sabrina was on her way to meet a friend in a bar here, but never arrived. Her body was found in nearby Cater Park last Saturday. Police are now trying to track down this man. Detectives are desperate to identify him. He was caught on CCTV in Pegler Square. It's understood he had access to this silver car.
If you've seen him or you know who he is, please do come forward. Any little bit of information may be critical for us.
And in the square, just before the vigil began, police were still carrying out searches. This area is a crime scene. Sabrina's killing has once again brought into sharp focus the issues of women's safety and male attitudes. And around the country tonight, people remembered Sabrina. From Newcastle in the north to Brighton in the south, there were vigils. On the Downing Street doorstep, a candle. Others did the same. In Kidbrooke, there was a minute's silence. And then this. A time to reflect at the end of a terrible week.
Well, in the spring, there was a vigil for Sarah Everard, who was raped and murdered by a London police officer. In the summer, there was a vigil for the sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, who were killed the year before in a park after a birthday party. And now, the start of autumn, we have another victim and another vigil. All these killings happened in London, but violence against women has been described as a national epidemic. And around the country, we saw vigils tonight happening, people coming out in support of Sabina. And basically, her death has resonated around the UK. Rita.
June, thank you. Our correspondent June Kelly reporting there. 3 school children have been sentenced to a total of 28 years in detention or prison for killing 13-year-old Ollie Stevens in Berkshire in January after a row on social media. A girl lured him to a field in Reading where 2 boys stabbed him to death. His parents have paid an emotional tribute to him and spoken of their devastation. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson has more.
Ollie was, his parents say, generous, caring and always a stand-up for the defenceless. Here he is, leaving his home on the day he was killed. He just told his mum that he loved her. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door.
And then I went to the door and it was a boy that I knew.
Ollie wouldn't have anything to do with normally, yeah.
And he said, Ollie's been stabbed. And I just remember running back towards the stairs because Stuart was upstairs and shouting, Ollie's been stabbed. And his sister was up there as well, and they both came screaming down the stairs. And you ran out without your shoes on over to the field. And I remember when I got there, Stuart just fell to his knees and he just was screaming, my boy, no. And he screamed that. And I looked over and Ollie was just completely lifeless.
An off-duty nurse found Ollie. She tried to resuscitate him, but he died at the scene. Today, Ollie's parents came to court to see the 3 14-year-olds who killed their son sentenced for their crimes.
To have shared the short amount of time we had with him was a gift in itself. We relaxed for a few moments, preoccupied with getting on with life, and took our eyes off him for just a moment. It cost us and him dearly. Our journey, our life sentence has just begun. Life without our beautiful boy.
Ollie was lured to the park by the girl as part of a setup. The 2 boys were already there, waiting to attack. They believed Ollie had grassed on them to the brother of a boy they had mocked in a social media group chat. They sent voice notes and messages where they talked about taking revenge. Videos and photos found on the 2 boys' mobiles were also shown to the jury. This is the younger boy showing off his knives in his bedroom. He was 13 when he stabbed Ollie. The older boy was 14 and had posed with a knife for photos himself. In her sentencing remarks, Judge Heather Norton addressed the 3 14-year-olds. She said what they had done that day was utterly cruel. She said to them they had taken 1 life, damaged their own futures and caused so much pain to so many people. When Ollie left home the day he was killed, his parents said he had a spring in his step and laughter in his heart. That, they say, is how they'll remember him. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News, Reading Crown Court.
The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show that there were 35,623 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means in the past week there was an average of 33,459 new cases per day. There were 7,124 people in hospital with COVID, according to the latest data. Another 180 deaths have been recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test, taking the average number per day in the last week to 143. On vaccinations, 89.6% of people aged 16 or over have had their first jab, while 82.1% are now double vaccinated. And more than 350,000 people have booked a coronavirus booster jab since the programme was launched in England last week. Our health editor Hugh Pym reports now on the state of the vaccine programme.
Reunited, 91-year-old Maggie Keenan and matron May Parsons.
Morning. Oh, Maggie. Good morning, good morning. We're allowed to hug, right? Oh.
In December, May gave Maggie her Pfizer jab, the first in the world. Today they were back at University Hospital Coventry for their booster jabs.
Ready? Yeah.
Since that first dose, Maggie says she's had attention from around the world.
I'm big news.
What's it like being big news?
Oh, I can't say a lot. I did a lot of writing. I've met some lovely people by writing to them, you know. I write loads of letters now.
But with more than 5 million in the UK who've not had any dose, the head of NHS England is stepping up the drive to persuade more people to get vaccinated.
If we have young people, or indeed people of any age, who are uncertain about whether it's right for them, then follow the science. It's still the best thing you can do to protect yourself, to protect others.
Having moved quickly ahead of most other nations, the UK has fallen back a bit against some of the leading economies in terms of share of the population who've been fully vaccinated. It's worth noting that some other countries started offering jabs to children before the UK did. But the UK is ahead of countries like the US, Japan and Germany. Those figures are for the whole population, not just adults. Experts say there are still challenges.
We need to try and maintain the enthusiasm that we saw earlier in the programme for the boosters, for those that are eligible. All of these things are difficult. There's fatigue in the population, and we just need to keep people's minds focused on the importance of these measures.
The full rollout of COVID vaccines to 12 to 15-year-olds has started in England and Scotland. Wales and Northern Ireland are set to follow. In England, the latest weekly survey suggests the only age group to see case rates rise was the under-16s. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Prince Andrew's lawyers in the US have accepted that he's been served with legal papers alleging that he sexually assaulted an American woman, Virginia Giuffre, when she was a teenager in 2001. The prince has always denied the allegation. Documents published by a court in New York say he has until the 29th of October to file a response. This Sunday will mark the end of a political era in Germany when elections take place for a new leader to replace Angela Merkel as Chancellor after 16 years. A whole generation of young Germans have known no other leader, and one of the big issues of the election campaign has been climate change, with activists holding big rallies in cities across the country. Our Europe editor Katja Adler reports now on the campaign to succeed Mrs. Merkel.
Relaxing on a Friday evening after 16 years at the helm of the EU's most powerful country, Angela Merkel is relieved perhaps that it's almost all over. The migrant crisis, the euro crisis, 4 US presidents, 5 UK prime ministers, 100 EU summits and more during her time in office. Hers will be a tough act to follow at home and on the world stage. Many Germans say they'll miss the stoic, pragmatic politician nicknamed Mummy.
Merkel is going to be strongly missed. I think so.
I will miss Merkel very much.
Because?
Because I'm a fan of her. Yeah.
I think it will be very hard for every candidate who comes next or the next chancellor to fulfill this role, because there will always be this comparison to Merkel.
And at EU HQ in Brussels, there'll also be a big Merkel-sized hole.
On the global landscape, I mean, it really matters. And, you know, I think Merkel was a very, very well-respected leader. So everybody's looking at, you know, who's going to follow in her footsteps.
Of course, there's the potential for Germany to take a dramatic new direction after 16 years of Angela Merkel, and that would be felt here and abroad. This is the EU's most influential country. But in the end, most Germans are stability hungry. And so the calls for radical change, while loud, are limited. What we're probably looking at here is change, but with a small c. This is the front runner to replace Angela Merkel, a centrist social democrat, currently Germany's finance minister, seen as a safe pair of hands. His closest rival is a Europhile conservative from Angela Merkel's CDU party. And the Green Party candidate is tipped to win a powerful position in the next German government. The environment is a big issue in Sunday's election. And in crowds like these, you find a fair few Merkel critics.
No justice! No peace!
Tens of thousands gathered in front of the German parliament today, demanding change and accusing Chancellor Merkel of failing to prepare Germany for the challenging future ahead. But climate concerns are now for the in-tray of Angela Merkel's successor. This photo went viral this week after she visited a bird sanctuary, appearing far more relaxed than usual. The Merkel era in German politics is drawing to a close. Katja Adler, BBC News, Berlin.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says it's deeply disturbed by accounts given to the BBC by migrants who say they've been unlawfully deported from Poland and left stranded near its border. Recently, there's been a huge increase in migrants crossing into Poland, Latvia and Lithuania from neighbouring Belarus. Its president, Alexander Lukashenko, has been accused of deliberately sending thousands of migrants across the borders of his EU neighbours. Poland, in turn, is accused of forcing them back, breaking international law. Both countries deny any wrongdoing. Our correspondent Nick Beak reports now from the Poland-Belarus border.
Hidden in a freezing forest in eastern Poland, Europe's latest crisis is unfolding. We meet men who fear they will be the next to die here, overwhelmed by the cold. They'd flown to Belarus from far and wide, each with the promise they could then reach an EU country. But they're stranded.
If the Belarusian could send me back to my country, fine. Yeah, I'll be okay. Better I die in my country.
21-year-old Magellan from Cameroon tells us how Belarusian troops took them to the Polish border.
They monitor the Polish police across the border. They tell us this way there's no Polish police. So they will tell us we must cross those wires.
Belarus, often called Europe's last dictatorship, is accused of exploiting these men in retaliation for EU sanctions. But Poland, an EU country, is accused of pushing them back, breaking international law.
We are playing us like a football. The Belarus will beat us, push us to Poland. The Poland will catch us, beat us, push us back to Belarus.
We put this to the local commander, who's just arrived.
And so have your border force been pushing migrants back into Belarus?
He won't answer that one. Poland has now sealed off this border area, saying it's under attack from Belarus. Aid agencies and journalists are banned, as we soon find out.
We're British journalists.
You can't go into this area.
Well, it was pretty obvious the border official wasn't going to let us into the restricted area. And human rights groups are really worried about what's happening inside this place. We know at least 4 migrants have died, and the concern is the world simply isn't getting to know what's happening there.
Some aid workers have travelled towards the border to try to help those trapped.
It's just people that need assistance, people that need medical assistance, people that need international protection to not be returned to the country where they face danger. So here on the ground, it's absolutely not politics. It's just humanitarian crisis that we are dealing with right now.
Another young man emerges from the trees. Jafar, 20, from Iraq. He's got hypothermia. The weakest are taken to hospital, the rest to a quarantine centre. But all fear they will soon be sent back to the freezing forest yet again. Nick Beak, BBC News, on the Poland-Belarus border.
The UK's teenage tennis star Emma Raducanu has been in action again today, but this time with a new partner on court, the Duchess of Cambridge. The US Open winner was joined by Kate for an event at the Lawn Tennis Association in London. Today, Raducanu announced that she's split from the coach who helped her to victory. The 43rd Ryder Cup is underway between the world's top golfers from the United States and Europe. The COVID-delayed competition is taking place at Whistling Straits on the shores of Lake Michigan, 3 years after Europe last romped to victory. But as our sports correspondent Andy Swiss reports, it's the United States who took the early advantage.
Just 6 in the morning, but already Whistling Straits was rocking. The dawn dash was on as thousands battled for the best seats. And come sunrise, the sound of American optimism echoed round the course.
How confident are you guys feeling?
Oh my God, what are you kidding? 100% confident. Go USA.
Can't bet against my boys. USA, baby. Let's go. Woo! Come on.
USA!
USA! USA! USA!
For Europe's players, though, the welcome wasn't quite so warm.
John Rahm and Sergio Garcia.
The Spanish duo soon set about silencing the crowd, taking the first match and the first point for Europe.
Tremendous effort for Garcia.
But it was largely a morning for American magic. Just watch this. Jordan Spieth almost tumbling into Lake Michigan, but with remarkable results.
How about that?
And others were just as inspired. Debutant Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay thrashing Rory McIlroy and Ian Poulter. And by the time Brooks Koepka sealed another point, the US had seized the initiative.
3-1 it is.
So with the wind picking up, could Europe pick themselves up? Well, they began the afternoon matches promisingly, especially Victor Hovland. But the Ryder Cup pressure is already on them.
It's in.
Yes, Europe trailing 3-1 after the morning matches, and things have also turned against them in the afternoon matches. They're currently leading in one match, trailing in 2 matches, and it's currently all square in the other match. Still early days, of course, but Europe already with plenty of work to do, Rita.
Thanks very much, Andy. Well, that's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good night. Bye-bye.